Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of building our sound system. One thing you may have noticed up to now is we have a bug where our blending is not animating correctly if we call a few fades in succession. So let me show you what that looks like. Oh, and we're going to fix this. I just want to communicate the bug. If you press a key to play a song, right, and you see that blend, if I were to go up and down in succession to increase the layer and then decrease, you see how it kind of hops around. We're going to fix that bug. We're also going to add mixer support, and we're going to do the single blending as well. And what I mean by that is the way that we've set up our MusicEvent assets. We can do additive, which blends up each layer up to a point, and then single will just keep this one, fade that one out while we fade this one in, fade that one out while we fade this one in, and do more cross-blending type of things. So we're going to do all that in this video, so just hang tight, and we're going to work through this one by one. Okay, first things first, we want to make sure that we are assigning our mixer that we've already set up. When we play our songs, we're actually setting the initial clip and volume and all that, but we're not actually assigning the mixer. So let's make sure that we do that. And that one's pretty easy. Whenever we play, we're assigning a new event right here. And all we need to do is where we assign the clip, we're just going to right after assign the mixer. So right here, when we do sources, we're going to go through each one in the index, and we want to access the, I believe it's called the output audio mixer group. And we're going to assign that to be equal to the music event that we have dot mixer. So all that does is make sure that if we were to do any kind of shenanigans with our different kind of mixers inside of our music event, that we would actually propagate that through properly. So we're assigning that here. Another minor thing, we could do more checking whenever we play something new. For example, we could make sure that if we pass a new music event, if music event is equal to null, like we can just make sure that we're not trying to do things on a unfinished music event if the designer passes us one to kind of check. And we could leave a warning here, debug.log warning, music event is empty, cannot play. Something like that. So if our music event is null, then we want to display this warning and return. So we don't really want to play anything if it's empty. So a little bit of checking there. The reason why we have this bug where if we trigger multiple fades in succession and it overriding each other, the reason is because while we are setting up a coroutine that we can track one animated sequence at a time, we're even testing whether there's something playing and stopping. We're never actually assigning our new coroutine to it. So this is how we would solve our bug. All we would do is we'd take our fade volume routine and we'd say fade volume routine. Let's just copy paste that. Here, fade volume routine is equal to, get rid of that little thing. So fade volume routine is equal to start coroutine, and then we do our IEnumerator and we pass it the parameters. Sometimes if I get a line that's too long, I like to break it off at a reasonable point. Some people don't, some people do. I just never want to use my side scrolling, and that's just personal preference. So this right here will start our coroutine, which remember is our lerp source additive routine. And that means that we can only run one of these at a time, because if we start one and we try to start another fade volume, if it's already running, right, so if it's not equal to null, it will stop it and it will start again at the beginning. So that means that at whatever point we get to here, if we start a new one, it will stop there, start a new one, and then we will continue where we left off. That's why we want to save the starting volume and not like an absolute value. So that should fix our bug. And while we're at it, let's just set ourselves up to do this on the single routine as well. So I'm going to put that down here as well. We only want one fade volume regardless of if it's an additive or a single, right? And technically we're only playing one music event, like one overall piece of music with different layers at a time. So this shouldn't be a problem, but just in case, we always want to expand this later. Let's set it up that way. Okay, so now that we've handled a few of those bugs, I think that's the major stuff. So now that we've handled a few of those bugs, let's go ahead and set up our single blending type. So it's actually gonna be very similar. We're still going to track a new volume and a start volume, and we're still gonna do this over time. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy paste this, which can be very dangerous if you're not careful. But I think that this is gonna cover the majority of my code. Now there's probably a way that we could set this up to where we are doing one large coroutine, and we can branch off and do a test if this blending type do this, if blending type do that. I believe that was how I originally started off trying to do that, but it became so long and I was branching off in such big chunks that it made sense just to do separate coroutines. And that way, if I actually wanted to go in and change anything about how this blending works, I will have some duplicated code, and that's fine, but because this is a very specific type of blending, then I want full control over that without having to worry about messing up the other blending types. So we're just going to separate that out. So again, copy all of this inside of the source additive routine, and we will change it. So you're going to see some errors, and part of that is because we're not passing in the parameters. So let's go ahead and grab those too. The parameters are going to be the same between both. We still want a target volume start and a fade time. The other cool thing is because we broke out our save source start volumes into its own little method here, that we can reuse it, right? Like we're doing the same code here. Since we broke that out as a separate thing, we can always just reuse that. So that's cool. So again, we have a new volume, a start volume, and our new volume is going to be the adjustment we want to make this frame. Our start volume is going to be associated with each layer, has its own start whenever we start running the function, and that's handled right here. So again, we're using our for loop here to do elapsed time and to be able to do this over time. You could do this with a while loop. Many people do. I like indices, and for loops give me a lot of control that I personally like. There's different ways to do almost anything in programming, but basically this is just going to run over time. So we're going to start with our elapsed time at 0. As long as our elapsed time is less than or equal to our designated fade time, which we're passing in, we're going to increase our elapsed time, which we're going to read off of time.delta time, which delta time is the time since the last frame. Then each cycle, we're going to go through all the layers. So go through our layer sources list or index or whatever we had there. We're going to go through each layer, and this is where our code is going to deviate. At this point, I'm just going to go ahead and leave this out because we know we're going to go through the elapsed time. We know we're going to go through all of the layers, and at the end of each cycle, we've gone through each of the layers one time. We're going to yield return. Then we also know that we're going to have a final set value where we're going to set it to the targets. We'll look at this and see if we need to change this. So at this point, we just need to put in the functionality. Right here, we were testing to see if we were less than or equal to whatever the active layer is. So if it's 2, then if we were less than 2 or equal to 2, we want to blend it up. Otherwise, blend it down. In this case, for a single layer, we want to test if we are the active layer and blend it up. If we're not the active layer, for all other layers, whether it's less than or greater than, we want to blend it down. So it's actually going to be very similar. And you can look up here the previous code as a reference. But basically, our start volume is going to be whatever we saved, right? With our save source start volumes, which is held onto at a field at the top called source start volumes. And we want to just go through the current one in the index. Our new volume adjustment, remember this is our local variable that we're just going to reassign. We created it at the top. Our new volume variable is going to be, and we're using lerping for this, so mathf.lerp. And as a reminder of how this works, if we have 2 points, like a start point and an end point, and then a value between 0 and 1, we can find the ratio and all the values in between. And since we're animating up to a certain value or down to a certain value, then that, we can set up a simple reusable system to do that. So again, this is going to be our start volume, our target volume, right? That's our start point in our endpoint. And then if we calculate the elapsed time divided by fade time, and once we get this value, we need to assign it to the layer that we're on, which is going to be layer sources I dot volume is equal to this new volume that we just calculated. Lerping is very powerful and very interesting once you get the hang of it. It's kind of just like a math pattern, but once you get used to it, you can do some really cool stuff. Now remember, this is going to do that for every single layer. So what we really want to do is we want to test if our current layer index is the active layer, right? Like we're pulling that from the music manager. So if our current index, as we're working through all the layers, is equal to our music manager dot instance dot active layer index, if these are equal, then this particular layer is the one that we want to blend up to the target. Otherwise, right, maybe we leave a little comment here. If active layer blended up, otherwise blend down non-active layers. So this one in theory is a little bit, more straightforward. If the index is equal to the active one, then blend it up. Otherwise, we're going to blend it down just like we did before. We always need our start, right? Which is source volume. Essentially what we're changing is the target. So start volumes, our new volume is equal to mathf.lerp. And we still want our start. Our endpoint is going to be it's going to be 0 because we're going to fade all the other layers down if they aren't already. And then finally, elapsed time divided by fade time. All right, and then now that we calculated it, we also want to assign to the volume that we just calculated. So really it's this value right here. Our target in this case is the specified target, and the target in this case is 0, right? Because we want to fade it down. And the other thing that we need to change here is at the very end, once we have done our lerping, I like to put this at the end. It's going to be so close that it's not going to functionally matter. But if you were to build, let's say, a unit test to test if the value did equal the target, it's not going to pass because it's not the exact value. It's going to be really close. Like if you gave it 1, it would be like 0.9987 or something. What we really want to do is we want to make sure that it is the exact value. And the reason it's not exact is just the nature of elapsed time and time to delta time. It's not going to hit an exact point. We could do some clamping there, but to me, when I get to the end, I just want to just hard set it because I know it's close enough if it made it to the end. So this little extra code is just making sure that we do that. So go through all of the layers. So layers.count, if the index is less than or equal to and this is incorrect. So like right here, we want to do our I equals the active layer index. We want to make sure that we're doing this if this is the active layer once we go through them all. And then all other layers we want to set to 0. Okay, I think this will do it. And we actually have to pass in our parameters here. Again, we're receiving this from the music manager. So our music player is responsible for all the layers of a song, but the music manager is responsible for the entire music event, like firing off that initial play command up here. So we need to pass this through target volume and fade time, which remember is from the parameters right there. Alrighty, I think this is good. We may find bugs and I'll fix those as we go along. I won't fix those outside of a video. I'll just show you that. But let's actually test out our song. I think song number 3 is the one with the separate single blending. Yeah, so the way that we set these up in previous videos, we have our single blending. I provided you these tracks, but honestly, as long as you have your own tracks that are the same beats per minute so that they're aligned, then this should work. I was actually playing a game near Automata that does something very similar to this. When they blend up and down the tracks, they have a ambient version of like maybe a layer of that track and they blend into the combat version, or when you step outside, it blends up. You can find this stuff in a lot of modern games. So let's test it. Let's make sure that we're receiving song number 3. So open up your SoundSystem tester. Come in here, we'll leave another serialized field for MusicEvent, song C. I know ABC and 1, 2, 3, like I'm probably being a little bit inconsistent there. It doesn't really matter as long as we are testing our thing properly. So we'll say if get key down, key code dot, what do we want? E? I think that's fine. So then all we need is song C dot play, give it a fade time. We'll just keep it consistent. Once we add this here, we have the play command on song C, save it. Don't forget, we actually have to drag our asset in. And there we go. Now let's actually test this. When I hit the play button, just so I'm not talking over this, I'm going to press Q to do this, and then I'm going to press W to make sure that it's blending in. Then I'm going to press E. Then after I do that, I'm going to fade up and down the active layers so that we're only blending in one layer at a time, right? We're blending in this one, then we're blending out, blending in this one, blending out, blending. So let's test that out. Hit play, click down in your scene, press Q. Okay, so you can hear that. I'm going to unpause and I'm going to increase and decrease the layer index just to make sure that we can still hear that properly. Okay, so you see now that we can fire our coroutine in succession, and it's blending properly rather than jumping around, so we've protected ourselves there. Okay, now let's try and increase the layer index and then blend into our other songs and make sure that that's working. Okay, so I am noticing that our song blending isn't working yet. Our layer blending is. So you know, we'll have to look into the song blending. My guess is it's something in the music manager, but you know, we'll look at that next. But for now, let's test the layer blending on our single blending layer. So we're going to blend up. Okay, so we see that working. The bug that we noticed when I was playing through here is it was setting one music player to 0. And that's because we actually have not set up any functionality for cross-blending between multiple music players. We only have one music player. So we'll do that in the future, but for now, we're only focused on the layer blending, and it looks like that's working. We have our additive blending, which we just showed, and we can fade up and down that into different layers. And we have our single layer blending, which is where we want to be. So I think in the next video, we'll look at, now that we have our layers blending working, we'll look at blending between an entire music player at, you know, its own layers being handled, blending into another music player, which we would call a cross blend. So we'll do that next.